Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all for coming out on a, not rainy yet, but looks promising. Thanks all for coming out to learn about the Manu-o-Ku and some of the activities that are underway to help us better understand the Manu-o-Ku and ultimately to do a better job of hosting them here in Honolulu. A couple other folks are here with me this evening to talk about their efforts with the Manu-o-Ku. Yvonne Chan will be speaking after I do, talk a little bit about what she's doing with teachers in the area. And Alex Uwo will be talking about work that he's doing as a student at the University of Hawaii. So yeah, start off by talking about the Hui Manu-o-Ku and the White Terns Citizen Science Initiative that we are leading. And as Whitey pointed out, read from the slide, this is what we're about: enhancing awareness, appreciation, understanding, and conservation of the Manu-o-Ku. Oh, in case I didn't mention yet, there is the third annual Manu-o-Ku Festival coming up next month. Very important event for those of us who are involved with the Manu-o-Ku. This is, like I said, the third one. There have been two before. This one's going to be at the Honolulu Zoo. So if you are accustomed to thinking in terms of the festival being at the Iolani Palace, this year we're trying the Honolulu Zoo. So look forward to seeing you there. So what is the Hui Manu-o-Ku? So speaking of the Manu-o-Ku festivals, the first one 2 years ago, no, almost 3 years ago, was an opportunity for a lot of people who were involved, had an interest in the Manu-o-Ku, to come together to put on this festival. And some of us who were there for the first one sort of looked around and said, wow, we didn't realize that there were so many different organizations and individuals who had an interest in the White Terns, the Manu-o-Ku. But we realized that there was no sort of ongoing efforts that any of them were involved with. They were all representing organizations, government agencies, local and federal, and they had an interest but no sustained efforts directed at the Manu-o-Ku. And so it occurred to us, well, perhaps since there is so much interest, maybe if there was an organization or some construct under which they could collaborate with others to remain involved with the Manu-o-Ku, maybe we could mount some efforts like a long-term citizen science initiative to help us better understand the Manu-o-Ku in this interesting relationship they seem to have with Honolulu. So the first festival was the occasion for bringing a group of us together and identifying, let's say, different agencies and organizations, conservation programs, and just private individuals who had an interest. And so that was the beginning of what is now the Hui Manu-o-Ku. The one thing that sort of unites us all is our interest in the White Terns. Here's some of this. I mentioned I'm sorry. Closer better? Okay. All right. Get real close with it. Great. Sorry about that. That's why I wasn't hearing echo before. Okay. So having mentioned that there are several different organizations involved with us, these are some of them. And so it's an informal grouping. We don't have officers. We don't have, it's an informal grouping. We keep our attention thoroughly focused on the terns and how we can better understand them and then get involved in conservation efforts to make sure they continue to do well here in Honolulu. So why pick the Manu-o-Ku as the target or subject of a citizen science project? Well, first of all, it is a native Hawaiian urban seabird, and there aren't many of them. And Honolulu is one of the two places, urban environments that we know of in the world where they come ashore, lay their eggs, and raise their young. The other one is in the South Atlantic, so it's the only one in the Pacific. That's a pretty interesting fact. The only urban area in the Pacific where white terns come ashore, lay their eggs, and raise their chicks. They're very tolerant of humans and human activity, so we can study them and we're not going to bother them. There's not actually very much known about the white terns. If you pick up a book on birds and look for white terns in the index, if it's there aren't going to be many references because it's for I think a variety of reasons, one of which is typically they're found in really remote islands like Midway and places where it's hard to get. But we have a local population right here in Honolulu that has essentially come to us. There is quite a bit of interest in the birds. As I said, there are several different agencies that already sort of were aware, and they do things occasionally associated with the white terns, but no ongoing sustained efforts. Oh, and of course, the official bird of the city of Honolulu. So there's quite a bit of interest in the terns. For walk around, as I often do, on the streets, you'll surveying, run into people who, once they learn that I'm watching the terns, they tell me about their stories of encounters with the terns. So they are a special bird that has a special place in the hearts of a lot of people that live in Honolulu. And they're just really, really interesting birds. So it seemed to us we have a unique opportunity to actually do some original field research without having to go real far afield. So we must effort. So some interesting things about the terns, I don't know how familiar you are with the Manu-o-Ku, but they're one of a very few birds that lay eggs without the benefit of a nest. This is the case of the Manu-o-Ku, they lay them directly on the branch. And that would seem like a pretty low prospect sort of way to lay an egg. But what we found is that they look for structures in the trees that can help them to keep the egg in place. And as it turns out, the species of trees that they choose, that they prefer to lay their eggs in, are species of trees that when you trim them, scar tissue forms around the cut, so a nice little cup forms. So what we find is they typically lay their eggs in a scar on the tree, often ones that have been made by the trees being trimmed. And that actually is better than a nest probably that they could build themselves. So interesting, one of the interesting, unique things about these birds. As I said, they're completely okay with human activity. As we gathered data, one of the first things we did was produce a map of the breeding range and identified all the trees where we've seen them breeding. And it turns out that the thickest, mostly highly concentrated parts of the breeding range are the most developed, busy, active parts of the greater Honolulu area. So along Kapolani Boulevard, along Kalakaua Avenue, that corridor stretches from the federal building up to the governor's mansion, Waikiki, where the people are, that's where we seem to find the white terns. So we wonder, so why is that? Well, also those areas are probably more predator-free, and there are predators that the terns have to worry about. Rats, cats, mongoose, and there are fewer of those where there's more human activity and more rat eradication efforts. So that's probably one reason why they like the areas that with lots of human activity. And they're very, very social. So if you like birds and if you like bird photography, you'd have to look hard to find one that is more compelling as a subject for bird photography. I was reminded of that. I spend my time now a lot of my time back in the mainland, and there's a species of bird called the American dipper, which is also interesting. And I learned that there was a pair that's breeding not far from where I've been living in Salem, Oregon. So I grabbed my camera and went out to get some pictures of them. Because one of the really neat things about the terns is you get to see them doing things like feeding their chicks, and you can take lots of good pictures of the chicks being fed. Well, I did find the dipper, found the nest, 3 little chicks there, and I saw the adult come in. It had about 1 second to try to get a picture. So other birds, hard to find. They do interesting things, but hard to catch them and get the good shots. The terns, they're right here. They don't mind having people around, and a great subject for bird photography if you're into bird photography. As I mentioned, they feed their chicks fish that they catch at sea. We have to remind ourselves, white terns are seabirds. Although we see them living in the trees here in town, we tend to think of it as just being passerines or other kinds of birds that live in trees. Well, they are seabirds, so they spend a lot of time at sea, and they eat fish and only fish. So when their chicks hatch back here in the trees of Honolulu, the parents have to spend a lot of their time ferrying fish back and forth between the ocean and the nesting spots in the trees. But one of the interesting things about the white terns is they don't eat and then regurgitate. They catch the fish and bring them back whole and feed them to the terns. So that's really interesting to watch that process of the handing of the fish over to the chick and watch the chick eat them. But that fact that the terns actually do go out to the ocean to catch the fish and bring them back whole also has made them important historically and culturally, the ancient Polynesian voyagers needed to rely on a number of different clues in nature to help them to navigate from one island to the next. So solar navigation and navigating by the stars would get them to within the area of an island, but actually to close and actually find the island, they needed to rely on other clues. So the Manu-o-Ku, because they go out to sea to fish, catch fish and bring them back whole to land, they knew if you see a Manu-o-Ku flying around with a fish in its mouth, it's going one place and one place only, it's going to land. So they became an important navigation aid for the ancient Polynesian voyagers. So what do we know about the Oahu population of white terns? Well, the current population we date from 1961, when a nesting pair was seen over on the site of Cocoa Head. 1980s, based on best available information, there was between 50 and 100 breeding pairs. The first real survey was done in 2002 by Eric Vanderwerf, and he counted 694 adults. So you can see the numbers are increasing. Then in 2016, he did another census, and very thorough. We covered as much of Honolulu. We covered all of Honolulu, Waikiki, and as far out as we were finding terns. And we counted over 2,300 in that survey. So as I say, they are doing well. They're thriving. Which, if you do the math, it's an annual growth rate of almost 8%, which for seabirds is very, very good. Hatching success rate, which is kind of interesting, given that they lay their eggs in trees without the benefit of a nest, and it's windy here during especially windy here during the height of the breeding season. Nevertheless, pretty successful hatching rate, almost 2/3 of them, over 2/3 hatch. And the overall breeding successes in 2016 was over 50%. The number of trees was pretty high and continues to increase. The incubation period is 30 to 35 days. So if you see a tern in a tree, you've got a month to watch it and enjoy it as it incubates the egg. And then after the chick hatches, 6 to 7 weeks before the chick is able to fly. So you have another couple of months. You can enjoy them in the tree. So there's some basic facts about the terns, but it raises some interesting questions. And so these are the questions we're sort of initially focusing on with our citizen science initiative. We don't know the answers to any of these yet, but we're accumulating data based on observations that individuals who develop an interest in the terns who would like to help us by monitoring the terns in the trees and providing us observation reports. So one of the things that you will find if you look up white terns in a bird book is that their breeding season is quite variable. They do not stick strictly to a breeding season. So we've seen just in the couple of years that we've been studying them based on observations from before, we are affirming that they are highly variable in their breeding season. Most recently, though, we tend to see a surge in breeding activity in the winter and spring, and then a tapering off through the summer, and then it picks up again in the fall. And given that they nest in trees here in town, and these are trees that are highly manicured, that presents a problems for the tree trimmers to know when they can go and safely go in the trees to trim without disrupting a white tern nest. Interrupting a white tern nest, since they are considered a migratory bird, is there are fines associated with that, pretty substantial fines. And so it occurred to us that, well, we don't want the tree trimmers to be getting into trouble because they inadvertently disrupt actively nesting terns. But we also want to protect the terns as best as we can. So we came up with the idea of putting blue ribbons on trees that will alert everyone that there's a nesting white terns in the tree. Tree trimmers love it because it helps them to know if they have to trim a tree that somebody has seen tern eggs or chicks in the tree. We also put our phone number for the Hui Manu-o-Ku. It's a hotline So if you find a chick under a tree, you can give us a call, and we can try to get the chick back up into the tree. Because since we know where the nests are, we know where the trees are, if we do find a chick on the ground, we have a pretty good chance of reuniting it with its parents, which is always the most desirable outcome of a chick having fallen out of the tree. We have an arborist who works with us, a professional tree climber, so that if we do find a chick on the ground and can correlate it with an empty nest up in the tree, we can ask him to climb up and put it right back. Another thing we're doing is we're banding white tern chicks. So it's interesting to sort of count the terns and watch the breeding activity in the trees. But to do more than that, we need to be able to track individual birds over the span of their life. So we have mounted an effort to begin to band in earnest. And so far, we banded 30 chicks since December of 2016. We're not banding indiscriminately. We're banding your terns that are in areas that we're monitoring quite regularly. And one of the things that we have you discovered, yes, indeed, they do come back to areas with the place where they fledged. This is a tern that actually had been rescued and fledged from a tree that was not hatched, which sort of raises an interesting question for those birds. Where will they sort of be? What's imprinted on them? Is it the place where they hatch, or the place where they actually fledged from? Well, this one came back to the area, to the spot where it had fledged and where it was banded a couple years later. So there's an association between where they fledged from and future activities. So a question often comes up is, how long does a tern live? And the books will tell you 16 to 17 years is sort of average. But during the surveys back in 2016, we came across a tern that was on an egg. And the way it was sitting on the egg, we could actually see it had been banded. And over time, we could see that the band turned. We got pictures of the band. Bird bands, if you know, have uniquely identifying numbers. We were able to recover the number and send it off to the office that manages the bird bands and issues the numbers. And they sent back this certificate of appreciation, noting that this bird had been banded back in 1981. In 2016, it was still laying eggs. So 35 years old and going strong. That's the sort of thing that unless you actually had that sort of evidence, it's not likely anyone will believe you that you've seen a 35-year-old tern still laying and tending to eggs. So banding terns is it's a lot of work, but it certainly is worth it in terms of things that we're going to be able to learn. We have a database where we store all of the sightings, observations. Currently, we have information on over 3,000 nesting events. The nesting event is simply when an egg gets laid. Our goal is to track, document whenever an egg does get laid, and then track, does that egg hatch? Track the chick, does it fledge? And if we can, to band the chick, and then watch it, later in life. The database is publicly accessible through our webpage if you have an interest in that sort of thing. That's what it looks like. We also have a nesting map. We didn't really know before just how broad the breeding range was. So when we document a tree, we take the GPS coordinates, put that in the database as well. So now we know where the trees are. And that map is proving useful for people who have to trim the trees and people who have to manage the trees, as well as people who are interested now in following the terns. And that too is available online. So each one of those pins represents a tree where we've seen the terns involved in breeding activity. We get this data from volunteers, citizen scientists, who are either agree to sort of adopt a tree and monitor it for us and submit their observations. And we have a variety of ways that the people can do that. We're working on an app. We're running a smartphone or a tablet. These are some screenshots. The pin shows you where the nesting spot is. Click on it, and we'll give you some basic information about the status of that nesting spot. And click on that link; it'll show you a picture of the tree and the nesting spot circled. So to make it easier for people who are interested in helping us gather data, actually go out in the field and do that. But of course, not all technology runs the same sorts of, is able to run the same app. So if you prefer to use things like Google Forms, we have a series of forms that you can use. We also have a web page. If you just want to notice something while you're out and about and want to just enter it through your PC, you can go to our web page and submit your observation there. But sometimes just simply do it on a piece of paper. So we have a form that you can download and print, and fill it out, take a picture and email it to us, and that works as well. And the tree is to help you identify where in the tree you saw the nest so that we can document that as well. So if you're interested in becoming a citizen scientist and helping us monitor the over 800 trees now that we've documented them laying an egg and raising a chick, we'd be more than happy to have you work with us, and we have a variety of ways that you can submit those observations. So this is our webpage, www.whiteterns.org. And we also have a Facebook group now for the White Tern Citizen Science. It's amazing how many people there are who are interested in the terns. We're interested in the terns before they knew about the Hui Manu-o-Ku. So we've gathered over 150 have become members of our Facebook page. So there's a regular dialogue there of sightings and questions and observations. So it's proven to be an interesting way to sort of expand the Hui, to include more people out in the community who have an interest in the terns, and to help us share information. Oh, now I mentioned there's going to be a festival coming up in a couple of weeks. It's a great opportunity to learn more about these other organizations and agencies that are interested in the terns, and to come in and it's a family event. Bring the family. It's at the Honolulu Zoo. So hope to see you there. Any questions on anything that I said? Yes? You said there were 2 urban areas to which they came. What was the other one? The other one is on the island of St. Helen in the South Atlantic. It's the island to which Napoleon was exiled. St. James, I think, is the name of the city, and they're nesting there as well. Yeah. I have another question. When it takes 30 days for the egg to hatch, does the male bird sit on the egg? Yeah. They're fantastic examples of parenting. They totally share responsibilities for incubating the egg. And then after the egg hatches, they share responsibilities for fishing and feeding, tending to the chick. So yeah, yep. Yes.
Yeah, one of the pictures showed a bird with 3 small fish in its mouth. You know where they would catch fish like that, and is that they scoop all 3 up at once, or are they going back again with already having one in their mouth?
Yeah, so that's one of the, I have to keep reminding myself, these are seabirds. And so much of what they do is actually done at sea, but I'm a land lubber, and I spend my time here on land. I've never had the opportunity to go out to sea to actually see them. But that is an area that is, if I say the terns are understudied, what they do and how they do it at sea is way understudied. So Susan Scott, who's going to speak a little bit at the end of our presentation, has had a chance to actually see them at sea, so she has observed some. But yes, that is very interesting. Often you will see them come back with as many as 8 fish in their beak, and you wonder how on earth do they do that. So they are not plunge divers. They don't plunge down into the water. They tend to be skimmers or catch fish as they jump out of the water. Another name for them is the ahi bird, because ahi, tuna, and others, that fish that dive deep and then spiral and force their prey to the surface. When they get to the surface, then there's a whole lot of fish, sort of the water is boiling with them. So the terns can see that from above, so they will congregate where this is happening. So that clues the fishermen as to where the ahi are. But then if the tern that just sort of skims across the water, they can pick up multiple fish, which probably would account for why very often when you see them, they're usually all facing the same way if they have multiple fish. So that would explain how that happens. But I also have seen them come back with multiple species of fish, which says they didn't do that. So they are able to catch a fish and then go back and catch more. Who knows how many they drop in the process, but they come back to shore with multiple fish in their mouth. We know that anatomically they're sort of equipped to do that. Their tongues are highly serrated. They don't have teeth, of course, but their tongues are serrated, and the roof of their mouth is also serrated. So once they get a fish in there, they're equipped to hold it in place while they go after another one. But yeah, fishing, I'd love to see it. Yes?
Have the terns been identified anywhere else on Oahu?
The only place that they have seen breeding is in the greater Honolulu area. There have been reports of them flying over or being seen offshore in other places, but the only place we've documented them breeding is here in the greater Honolulu area. Yeah.
They're a native Hawaiian. What are they doing in the South?
Well, so this is just one of the places where they breed. They're common throughout the tropics, so they are found elsewhere. What interests us about this particular population is that of all places they're here, and they seem to like it.
So they're not endemic.
They're not endemic, no. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Aloha. So I'm Yvonne, and I put up this picture because I first came to Hawaii in '96 and worked at Hakalau and on Maui in the forest, on the Maui Forest Bird Project, and worked on these amazing native birds, and was so excited that we have a native bird that we can watch right outside our windows here in Honolulu. And so I started at Iolani. I'm a teacher at Iolani School. So I started there about 4 years ago. And I was just like literally getting my mail at the mailboxes and looked up and saw this cute little chick. I was like, oh, what's that? And then I found out that it's a Manu-o-Ku, and we found one. So I emailed the faculty and I said, hey, we discovered some Manu-o-Ku on our campus. And it turned into this whole engaged campus. And so it turns out that we had students and teachers going out there and taking pictures of them because they're so cute. We put a webcam up so that we could, so everyone could get streaming Manu-o-Ku chicks into their classrooms, and teachers would just have them up in the background while the parents came in and fed. And turns out this is kind of a crowded map, but we ended up that year in 2016, we had in 2015, we had 12 nests. So you can see like all the red stars are Manu-o-Ku nests, so they're pretty dense on our campus. It's almost every kukui tree and every shower tree. And we think that they like the shower trees on our campus because of the way they're trimmed. They're trimmed with a nice canopy, and actually the trimming kind of almost creates a little cup for their eggs since they don't build a nest. And I just wanted to remark that our nesting success this first year was almost 100%. I mean, I think we actually had some chicks get blown out, but because we're a school and students notice things, like we're able to grab a ladder and put it back up. So we think schools are a good place for these terns to nest because they're watched constantly. We also do a really good job controlling the rats and the mongoose and the cats on campus. So their main threat on our campus seems to be them getting blown out. And this is just, so we went from, me just checking on them to all these faculty, and then we have entire biology classes go out and check on them. And it really engages the students and just kind of opens their awareness to this native bird right on this campus and right outside their windows. And because we're into technology, we have a student so this is actually a homemade webcam built by a student, Andrew. And this is a picture of him putting it up in the tree. So our trees aren't that high, so we can actually get up there with a ladder. And this is a picture of Maddie, who's turned our terns into an independent research project. So she's asking questions like, what is their nesting success? Are there differences between nesting success on schools and other places in Honolulu? What types of trees are they nesting in? The timing that Rich showed of the time of year, and what are they eating? So she's going to do this summer, she's going to spend some time with our webcam film and record the type of fish that are brought in and how often and how many. So these birds and the Citizen Science Initiative has really enabled us to focus on place-based STEM education and to engage the community. And the kids know that by collecting data, they're helping this larger effort across Honolulu to understand these birds and help protect and conserve them. The kids get to do real science and collect scientific data, and they understand that what they're doing has a real world impact. I mean, the webcam, and then it's really cool. Like the kids start thinking of how can we protect them? You know, like put the metal rings around the trees, and we've even had a class actually because when they started being blown out of the trees, one of the teachers said, well, why don't we see if we can make them a better nesting platform? So he actually had his class design, come up with different designs, and then we actually placed them in some of our trees to see if they would use them. And they haven't yet, but it was a fun project to get the kids engaged. Yeah, so to have a real world impact and help a threatened species. And then the way that we are trying to engage more schools and more students and teachers in the Hui Manu-o-Ku is through these learning communities that we've called STEM Plus, where we try to connect teachers and schools to different citizen science initiatives and experts in the community. And so we had one of these, and we had Rich talk, and we've had Dr. Lindsay Young and Eric Vanderwerf come as well. And so we try to have an expert talk, and then we also try to have some teachers share some of their curriculum that they've done with their students. So here, so this is, we have them down at Iolani School, and we provide dinner, which always helps, a free dinner, and the teachers can come learn. And so at our first one in 2016, we had teachers from 13 different schools come to Iolani and learn more about the Manu-o-Ku. And then in 2017, we actually had 17 schools, so it grew a little bit. And so this is an example of what Cindy Sidow at the Honolulu Waldorf School has done with the Manu-o-Ku. So she actually created a puppet show with the Manu-o-Ku, and this is actually available online. I can give you the link. And it's this wonderful 15-minute puppet show about the Manu-o-Ku that they wrote and then performed, and they sewed the little puppets and everything. And then this is from Dr. Kat Peterson, and he, you know, he's at Holy Nativity School, and so there's a whole bunch of nests at Holy Nativity, and so it's great. The kids name the birds, and he takes pictures of them, and it's just a great time. These STEM Plus meetings are a great time for teachers to come together and share curriculum and how we can get our kids more engaged. Yeah, so and then we have discussion groups. How can we, what can we do with our curriculum? How can you monitor the Manu-o-Ku at your school? And here's another example of, yeah, some curriculum but we need more. So, I mean, a lot of the native birds have like really cool finger puppets and just really nice like coloring books and that type of thing. And so we would love to have more of that type of thing to engage the next generation in watching native birds. Any questions?
Alrighty, so aloha mai kako. My name is Alex Wool, and I'm currently an undergraduate research student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm here today on behalf of Kapiolani Community College's Manu-o-Ku research project. And so before I begin, Yvonne gave a pretty awesome presentation on what the K through 12 public and private schools are doing here in Honolulu in regards to the Manu-o-Ku. So this is kind of like the college approach that some of our research students have kind of taken up since 2014. So just some background info and a little introduction. So our project actually began in 2014 under the direction of one of the professors at Kapiolani Community College, Dr. Wendy Kuntz. And the reason why our project was created was in 2014, KCC had kind of been in the framework of developing plans to build their new state-of-the-art culinary facility right off of Diamond Head at the old Fort Ruger's Officers Club, also known as the FROC. But before they began construction, they kind of wanted to ensure the community that no nesting terns were going to be disturbed, and that they would kind of do an environmental impact statement to ensure that anything that was in the area that might be displaced would be protected. And so a team of students was assembled, and that's kind of how our Hui came to be. So the objectives of our project have been primarily these three: to protect any nesting terns that were found at the various locations across the KCC campuses, to establish some kind of protocol, because none had existed before, for communicating the birds' presence with our campus auxiliary services, which is in charge of maintaining the school grounds, but they're also in charge of tree trimming, which could affect the terns in a negative way because they are federally protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and to identify tern breeding phenology to allow us to identify peak nesting so that we could create better management decisions for our school. And so when they did decide to trim trees, they would have a better idea of when the best time of the year to do that would be. So this is just a super basic snapshot, broad overview of the structure of our projects. This is kind of like our materials and methods, our who, what, when, where, why. So we conducted behavioral observations with a minimum distance of approximately 10 meters away, using primarily binoculars and spotting scopes. And the surveys were conducted within the hour after sunrise, from approximately like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday. And a majority of our studies focused primarily on the KCC campus and the FROC sites. So you can kind of see in this picture here on the left, one of our students observing terns through her binoculars. And on the right, we have one of our students measuring tree height and nest height using a clinometer. And then we have on the bottom left, one of our lead members doing her observations. And this is the old school way we used to flag trees, because this was back in 2014 before the Hui had kind of created this nice flagging with DLNR. We used to have to put our own phone numbers on there. And yeah, so this is a short little list of the projects that we've had conducted by students so far. We primarily focus on the breeding phenology and the campus-wide distribution of the species. But after a couple of years of doing this project, we've expanded it to include nest and tree species selection, which includes like how they pick their habitat, the height and the species of the trees that they decide to nest in. We looked at the comparison of growth rates and chicks using photography. We had students with backgrounds in Hawaiian studies kind of look up the significance within Hawaiian and Polynesian cultures. And we used the multimedia platform to create live streams of our nesting terns and to also capture some really awesome photos of the breeding and courtship behavior that we were observing. So I'm going to go through this. There's a lot of data. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come and ask me about them after. There are a lot of projects that we have conducted, so I'm just kind of going to give you a brief glimpse into some of the work that we've been doing. So this is the breeding phenology from spring 2014. You can kind of see the three main aspects that we were focusing on were the courtship, incubation, and nesting periods. And so you can see in spring we had 6 nests that we had kind of found. And then we have spring 2015 with 11 nests. And then jump a little bit to spring 2017, and you can kind of see how not only have the amount of information and data that we've been able to collect has increased, but we are also able to increase the amount of nests that we've been observing. And there's your average breeding phenology from 2014 to 2017. And so we also looked at the nesting distribution, and we mapped it out in GIS. So down here in the bottom left, you can actually see this is the Fort Ruger's officer site. That was our primary focus location for the project. And as you can see, we only really found one nesting pair down there that had a chick. And then the rest is right here on KCC campus. We also had a foraging study that went on in 2014 that kind of encompassed the whole Diamond Head area. So you can see Kapiolani Park. This is the Diamond Head Lighthouse area. You have the Fort Ruger officer site right here and the KCC campus. And then distribution for 2015, you can see the overlapping triangles and circles where terns had decided to return to the same nest tree. And so in order to kind of troubleshoot that problem with having multiple terns in the same tree, year after year, we had to create a new key, which is kind of what this looks like. So the yellow stars represent multiple nests year after year, and the green stars represent new nests within the same tree or within the same area. And so one of the other studies, we compared tree heights versus nest heights. So we were trying to look for a correlation. We were also trying to factor out trees that were too short, like trees that would not provide suitable nesting habitat for the terns. And there's also a chart that kind of follows along with this graph that details the species of trees that these terns decide to nest in. And then our kind of like cultural and Polynesian studies significance, where we looked at different cultures throughout the Pacific, because these birds aren't endemic, they are indigenous, so they're found throughout Polynesia. And they're mentioned a lot in Hawaiian, Tahitian, Maori, and Samoan cultures. They're referred to in religion. They're often associated with the gods or demigods. And their name, Manu-o-Ku, actually translates into the bird of Ku. And Ku is one of the 4 demigods within Hawaiian society. He's the god of war and also the god of navigation. So I'm missing a picture, but this picture in the bottom right kind of details footage from the film Moana, the Disney movie. And they depicted the Manu-o-Ku because the Polynesian voyagers often used them, like Rich said, to indicate land or good fishing spots. All right, and last but not least, our multimedia studies. We had 24/7 live streams using an internet platform called Twitch TV. And using that, we could send out a link to anyone we wanted to across the world, and they could kind of view our chicks and keep an eye on how they were doing and learn more about what we were doing on our campus. And this was kind of a great opportunity for us to reach out to the community, to spread the word, and to kind of just get our students involved and the projects that we had here on campus. We also used photos to compare growth within tern chicks and captured a lot of illustrations and examples of breeding behavior that we were observing, such as courtship, nesting, and rearing their young. So this is kind of, if you look at this photo at the bottom, it's actually one of the courtship behaviors that we kind of take note of. It's called the birds kind of bring each other's feathers for, and so we can kind of indicate that they're a mating pair. And if you look at it, you can kind of notice we have a nice little like circle outline around it. And that's not because we went back on Instagram and edited it. It's because we are really poor college students. So we did this instead with our phones and our cameras, and we used spotting scopes and binoculars, and we ended up capturing some pretty awesome footage. So this is sort of along the final project. We have feeding behavior. We have that don't want to turn around and just moon you all day. We have fledglings that look like they have lashes, and yeah, this is a really awesome picture because it would be really great to see how they do catch the fish like this. And this photo doesn't illustrate it as well, but this tern is actually like testing for a potential nest site. So they kind of stomp their feet and wag their tails when they're trying to test out the stability of the branch that they're on. And I guess if it passes, they decide, hey, I'm gonna put an egg on this branch and have a baby. And yeah, we had a lot of challenges. This isn't a turn check. I'm sorry, guys. I just needed a picture for the banding. But one of the challenges that we had with our project is that we actually didn't, a lot of the students that are coming in, they're freshmen in college, they're sophomores in college. We don't have the banding experience. We don't have the banding permits. And to obtain that experience and permits, it takes years and it takes months. And so it's hard to quantify if the terns that we're seeing are the same terns that come back every year, or if, you know, new terns are coming or whatever. We can't ID which tern, who's who. And so it's been great within the last year because Rich and Eric and Javier Cotton have actually gone onto KCC's campus. So we actually now have 2 new terns that have actually officially been banded. So the project is always expanding. Another challenge we had was nest detectability. As you can kind of see from the 3 graphs we had over the 3 years that I showed you, our nests, the amount of nests that we had on campus doubled and tripled. So it's a matter of, are we getting better at finding the nests, or is the population increasing? And I think it's a mixture of both. I think we are getting better at locating the nests because we're figuring out what to look for. We're figuring out better methods to kind of hunt these nests down. But I also feel like more and more terns are coming to the campus to breed every year. And then project recruitment. So Kapi'olani Community College, it's primarily a 2-year transfer university, and then our students are on their way to UH or on their way to bigger and better things. So we always are having problems recruiting members because you have to remember a majority of our students are freshmen coming in from high school. And so they don't pick up a research project their first year into college. They kind of have to get settled in, and then they start looking for things. And then nest failures. We have feral cats, we have mongoose, we have high winds and really bad weather. So that really affects our data, and it's something that we're constantly like trying to improve and deal with. So discussion and future research. Usually when you start a research project, you end up in the end with more questions than answers. You have 1 question when you start and you end up with 10 questions when you end. So we're hoping to expand the project even further with nesting and habitat selection, looking at why they choose the trees that they're in and why, how they choose their trees and why. Expand on historical and cultural significance. There's a lot of mention of them within Hawaiian mythology. We wanted to look at the moon phases and the changing tides and how that affects the way that they hunt and forage, how they fish, and when they return to their nests. And to compare the comparison of their growth rates over a more continuous time, because we've only done that study for about a year, and to investigate their diet and foraging behavior so that hopefully we can see them fishing out at sea and catching multiple fish and seeing how they actually do that. So it is quite fascinating. And so this is where we are now. So as of the spring 2018 semester, we've had about 10 undergraduate students participating in the research, majority of them being biology and natural resources majors. Data is continuously being added to establish like a baseline monitoring program and management system for the campus. And the project continues to serve as an avenue for building capacity among local students for avian monitoring and survey techniques. And that's really, really important because here in Hawaii, we don't have a lot of those opportunities like most mainland colleges and schools. So it's really important to kind of reach out and get local students into capacities such as these. And without that, thank you. And any questions? So I just like to say thank you to all the people on this list. And yeah, any questions, please feel free. Yes.
Do they always just lay 1 egg, and do they have more than 1 season where they?
No, so the terns actually, they have peak seasons, but more or less they breed year round. And we've noticed too on our campus that it is pretty relevant with the data that Rich and them have collected using the Hui o Manu-o-Ku. It's about a 69 to 70% hatching rate. And they only lay 1 egg at once, but we've observed that, say that egg fails due to like high winds or something predates on it, they will lay another egg within that same like nesting season or period. But they do nest year round, so they'll nest from like January all the way through December. Yes. That's a good question. I think it varies between each bird, and these birds aren't particularly sexually dimorphic. So they look the same. They're both white. They both have black beaks and black beady eyes, and there's not really a way to tell male from female. I don't know, Rich, how big are? Yeah, wingspan is about 18 inches. Yeah. Yes.
You had one picture that looked like there were two young birds on the same branch.
Yes.
They were both fuzzy. What was the story with those two?
So those were, which was actually by a professor. That was at the center that we used to have out at Black Point. And so, yeah, that's from Carolyn Blackburn's house, and she had been rehabilitating those terns out there. Yes.
Usually bird populations are diminishing. Population. Any speculation as to why that's the case?
It's a good question, but the interesting thing too about our terns is that within the Hawaiian Islands, you'll only find them really breeding here on Oahu and Honolulu, and that's we've speculated that to be because of a high impact with humans and creating natural barriers against predators. And the only other place you're going to find these guys breeding within the Hawaiian Islands is far up in hundreds of miles to the northeast in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands around Midway. And so if I had to like hypothesize what might be happening, I would say that humans are kind of creating a little bit better habitat by reducing the amount of impact that predators are having on them. So that might potentially be why they're increasing. Sorry, taking up all your time.
I just have a very brief.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you. My name is Susan Scott, and I write a weekly column about marine animals, the Honolulu Star Advertiser, for the last 30 years. And I know my own experience of sailing, and Craig and I were just saying we have seen them fishing many times, and we still don't know how they get 5, 6, 8 fish. But I was interested in white terns for years from working at Tern Island and Midway. And when I heard that there were some more and more nesting in Honolulu, I wrote some columns about it. And my readers started sending me amazing stories and pictures of white terns on their lanais and the railings in Waikiki. And so I joined the hui, Manu-o-Ku, and was really delighted to learn that there's so much information and so many people working really hard to get awareness out on these birds. And one of my readers had written her own book, put together a book and published it online and sent me a copy. It was great. And I thought it's time for a book of the information that we already have. There's still a lot coming, but we do already know quite a bit about them from everyone's work. And so the University of Hawaii Press is publishing my book that I have finished. We're copy editing right now, and photographers have all volunteered fantastic photos. It's really going to be beautiful photos, and a lot of other people who are watching the terns. And it will be published in October. And so we'll be having a white tern coming out party for the book. And we'll dedicate the royalties to the Hawai'i Audubon Society, which is great supporters of the birds. And we've been members since 1988. So it's one of our favorite charities, organizations, conservation organizations in Hawaii. We'll let you know when that happens. But then we'll have a way to look up facts and get information about the birds. So I said when we get the book, Rich said he's going to have a bag of them because people keep asking him when he's walking around monitoring the books what he's doing. And I said, well, I think we should make him sandwich boards. And so he can walk around and advertise that there's a book on white terns. So thank you.
We have a few more minutes for questions for our 3 speakers. So I'm going to ask our speakers to stand here, and we can open up for questions on any other presentations we saw this evening.
About one of your graphs had super trees.
Right. Yeah, so there are over 800 trees that we've identified where they are breeding, used for breeding, actually laid an egg, raised a chick. And we have a growing army of volunteers, but there are more trees than we can monitor regularly. And to do useful science, we need a steady stream of data on a set of trees. So a super tree is simply a tree that we've identified as one that we're going to prioritize, trying to get a monthly data point. Now, all we're looking for, minimally, a data point is once a month, roughly 30 days in between observations. Take a look at that tree, check the nesting spots in them, and we've documented the nesting spots, and simply tell us, is it vacant? Is there a tern there sitting on an egg? And it's easy to tell. Is there a chick there? And then when it goes vacant again. With those 12 data points for each nesting spot, we're going to be able to learn quite a bit about the cycles at all, breeding behavior. So that's a super tree, is simply a tree that we've identified as one that we're trying to monitor closely. Yeah. Yes.
How many nests have you seen per pair of bird?
I'm sorry. How many
times in nesting per pair?
So we have typical. One is the norm, not really not unusual to see two, and we have seen a few that have done three within a year. Yeah. Yeah. So if you wonder, so why did we start with two in 1961 and we're up to over 2,300 now? It's things like that. They're persistent. As Alex pointed out, if they fail, they will try again. We've seen them lay another egg within 2 weeks of losing the previous one. So they are persistent. Yes. Michelle?
Phenology and PCC, have you guys thought about how maybe through website trying to get the possible? I know there's other problems.
Yeah, actually our data is part of Rich's data. You can download it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
It's all
but like
contributed.
Students have individual research projects like the cultural research.
Oh.
You know what I mean? All of you guys have great drilled into students have drilled into things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we should post it on the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have a student publication at Phenology Community College, and then we do a lot of outreach. So a lot of our presentations, a lot of our research projects are presented at the Hawaii Conservation Conference. We presented at a few national conferences in Washington and in Texas. And then we do community outreach events such as these and represent the data. But that would be a really good thing to kind of formally publish a paper online so that everyone can access it from a journal or a database.
It's really hard to get all the tidbits that are
Mm-hmm.
But even if it's just a literature list that even is about your undergrads and college students, even high school students, like there's a list of things that have been investigated that can be researched.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right, we're going to take your question. You're the last question, okay? Okay.
I just was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the matings of the terns. Do they stay with the same mate for all those years?
Yeah, by reputation, they mate for life. But truth be told, it's kind of hard to tell. So they all look alike. And also, so those that study birds closely are saying, well, yeah, so some birds have reputations that they mate for life. But with most species, even those that do have a reputation for mating for life, there's a certain amount of that goes on as well. So, but yeah, typically they mate for life. Yeah, yeah. So I have a question for you all. Do you want to become citizen scientists and help monitor the white terns? I can give you a crash course real quick on how to do it. So as I pointed out, when they lay an egg, it's 30 to 35 days incubation. So you can look up in the trees to find them. And if you see a white tern sitting in the same spot for a number of days, it's probably on an egg. So that's the first lesson, look up. The second lesson is look down. Because once that chick hatches, it has nothing to do for the next 2 months except sit there, eat fish, and poop. And when they poop, it's a very, it's white, only white. So you can you can become guano specialists here. Since white terns are seabirds, their digestive systems are highly efficient at digesting seafood, and their poop is white. No color, no other colors, no seed shells, just white splats on the ground. As I say, since they go no place except sit there, the poop is clustered. So if you happen to come upon a cluster of white poop on the road, on the sidewalk, or even on the grass, look up. There's a good chance there's going to be a white tern chick sitting up there. So with those two bits of information, you can become white tern citizen scientists and help us with our monitoring. And if you'd like, I will leave some cards up here on the speaker here that has our web page, Facebook page address. You can go online. You can check the map to see if there are white tern nesting trees in your neighborhood, where you work, where you play. And if you are interested in, as I say, we're looking for a data point a month on those trees. Contact us and we can let you know, how to get involved. So thanks for your interest and your attention.